welcome to our seminar on optimizing your relationship with your mentor.
So I'm Sally Moody, and some of you have had me in classes, but I'm the chair of anatomy and a professor in the anatomy department here. And I wanted to start off telling you a little bit about my history, because I used to be a graduate student too. Can we get rid of that picture? Or if I close it, it keeps going. Yes, it does. Okay. So that's me back in 1978. And in my career, I started off as a technician in a laboratory, and then I got a master's degree. So I had a master's degree mentor. I did research as an undergraduate as well. And then I went to a neuroscience PhD program, and that's me as a second-year graduate student. So I had a PhD mentor. You can tell that I worked on chick embryos, so I studied the hindbrain development of chick embryos and what's wrong from a safety perspective from this. The footwear, yes, you know. So my stipend was $3,500 a year, but I could afford one pair of Birkenstocks. Is that one other thing wrong? My hair. Supposed to have it tied back when you're in the laboratory. So anyhow, then I did a postdoc. So I had a postdoc mentor, and then I became a faculty member in 1983. And I had an unofficial faculty member. The guy who had the lab next door to me decided to tell me everything that I was doing wrong, and but he was really helpful. So even though back in those old days there weren't specific mechanisms for mentoring, it happened, and I think what I want to do today is give you, I don't know if I can actually answer the topic of this discussion, and I would like it to be a discussion, but I can give you some advice in terms of what I've found on the web and what I've been doing in my own lab, and some of the things that I did wrong during the development of my career. So I'll touch on those if I can remember as we go through some of this today. So the first thing I think you really need to recognize is that mentoring and being a trainee is a two-way process. It takes both of you to make it successful. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time giving you my perspective of what the PI's point of view. And if you're a research lab is a small business. A PI has to produce products, just like a small business. Some labs are kind of bigger businesses, but even a lab that has 40 people in it, that would still be classified as a small business. It's got to produce tangibles. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. So what are the tangibles in a laboratory? Papers. And papers lead to grants. Those are the tangibles. And you've got to realize that that's what your PI is thinking about 23 out of the 24 hours a day. You've got to have a product that you can sell, and that's publications. And you have to get capital. You have to pay your people. You have to pay your own salary. And you have to pay your people, and you have to keep the lab supplied so it can actually do what it needs to do. You don't get grants if you don't have publications. Now, there are intangibles, and that's your scientific reputation. So that's what a PI thinks about. What do I need? I need publications and grants, or I don't have a job. I don't get tenure. I'm putting up 2 faculty members in my department right now for tenure and promotion, and I wouldn't even put them up if they didn't have a great publication list, and they have really good grant support because they won't get tenure at a university, okay? Or if I'm already tenured, I'm an associate professor or a full professor, and I've lost all my grant money, the dean takes my lab, and that's happening all the time. So in order to get those things, I need a talented and inspired workforce. So I have to train them so that they work effectively and efficiently because the clock is always ticking. And you need, and I'm going to emphasize this, you need a collaborative team.
Now I know what that is.
Actually, it's on a blog for lab archives. That's why I took the pictures, but I decided to use them today. So you need a collaborative team, and that doesn't waste energy fighting. Conflict is something that a mentor has to work with. Now, unlike a business, there is mentoring in many businesses, but unlike a business, in an academic setting, another really major part is to train the next generation of scientists. And there are tangibles there as well. So, for example, undergraduates, you've got to get them into grad school or medical school or a professional school of some sort. You got to get your graduate students to complete their degrees. It's really great if you can get them to have fellowships, to be awarded fellowships, to get awards from societies, things like that. It's the mentor's job to get the graduate students into a good postdoctoral position. And it's the mentor's job to help a postdoc get a good job. The intangible, again, is reputation. If you're training these people and they go out into the scientific community and they say, she really sucked, it hurts you because it makes it really hard to recruit anybody back into your lab. Okay? So this is what a mentor or what a PI is thinking about. So the life of a PI is a balancing act. The person that I worked for as a postdoc was a very, very famous scientist. He was the leader in developmental neurobiology, 40 years ago. And I knew that his reputation as a person was horrible. But I wanted to learn what his lab was doing. He put all of his emphasis into being a famous scientist, and he could care less about anybody in his lab. And many people in his lab just quit and left. And that's a scenario that remains. I mean, this wasn't unique to back then. I was a postdoc for only 2 years because I couldn't take it. So I left early. I canceled my NIH postdoctoral fellowship early and went and got a job. You can have a caring mentor who's not effective at getting you to the next step of your career. And so one of the things that you need to think about, not just in choosing a mentor, but also in managing your current relationship with your mentor, is figuring out what they need, what their goals are, and how you can get them to help you to the next step. And this is actually pretty difficult. I mean, I'm not particularly good at figuring out how other people think, and so you have to make sure that you investigate the relationship, and that's obviously true in every aspect of your life, but it is also true if you want to succeed in your position and your career, advancing your career to the next step. You got to figure out what kind of a person your mentor is and see how you can take advantage of that. I don't mean to manipulate them, but to understand where they're coming from. Are they all the way over here, or are they all the way over there? Are they back and forth? you know, we're all a little schizophrenic. So I want you to think about it. Now, what is a mentor? So I decided to look it up on Google. I said, well, that's pretty obvious. But I want to emphasize, it does not say in that definition that your mentor is your friend, or your confidant, or your therapist, or your guru. All right? This is a business relationship. And I bring this up because you can be very friendly. I have a friendly relationship with the people in my lab, but I'm not their best friend. And I was the best friend of my graduate advisor. I was her very first graduate student, and we became really good friends, and we would go out for beers several nights a week and things like that. And that was great. And it got me through the first couple of years we had of graduate school. You know, I was very insecure about what was going on and stuff. But when it came down to the business of having to have a business relationship, when we got mad at each other, and you will get mad at your advisor, and your advisor will get mad at you, it became personal. And when I graduated, I never talked to her again. We never communicated again. That is really poor management. It was my fault. I wasn't mature enough to realize that and it was both of us, I mean, it wasn't 100% my fault. We both made the mistake of having this friendship relationship, which had to end because we had a business relationship. Neither one of us dealt with it. And so that's all I need to say. I don't need to go on and on and on. Okay. Now, it just so happened that at the beginning of this week, the association, what's it called? The American Association for Anatomy, they have a monthly newsletter, and they sent out this, in the newsletter was this. So I gave you a copy of this, just in case you were interested, in that little packet. And so this person, Sarah Surratt, said, okay, mentoring is really important. So what should your mentor do? A good mentor can carry you through your qualifying exams and completing your PhD project with awards and accolades. They can support you. They can get you through that. A good mentor will suggest that you join a professional society. Of course, she's going to say that because she's writing it for the AAA. But get you into a society that will be your academic, if you're going into academia. A good mentor will keep you grounded in the competitive reality of securing grants and writing papers. You do need to rely on your mentor to suggest where to send papers, where to send grants. Pursue a project that excites you and give you credit when it's yours. Allow you to make mistakes so you can learn from them, but help you with math. Continue to read your grants and papers. I do that for my previous graduate students who are now, you know, writing papers and sending grants. They contact me, and I'll help them out with stuff. We'll give you advice that you don't want to hear. They need to be honest yet supportive. When I read this, I was like, oh my God, you know, that's a pretty high bar for a person, for a mentor, to have to be all those things. And, you know, I think an individual will be a bunch of those things sometimes, but not all times. But she made, you know, she kind of idolized the position to the point that it made me really nervous, because I'm not doing all those things all the time. So I went to the internet and I said, I looked for definitions of mentorship from a business. So that's what this link is. So from the business community, what's a good mentor? Somebody who has experience. There's no point in learning from somebody who doesn't actually do what it is that you do, right? Character. Should have admirable qualities such as integrity and honesty. Again, the person I postdoced with was not honest and had some flaws in his scientific integrity, and that bothered me a great deal. I was a little bit I was a little bit puzzled on how to interpret this last sentence, qualities that are sustained through the generations of leadership. And I was like, I'm not really sure what that means in a scientific situation, but I came to realize, because I had to explain it to you all, that if your mentor is honest and has integrity, that's a role model, and that you will take that to the next generation when you are a mentor for somebody else. And so I think that's the way I've chosen to interpret it. That if your mentor has these, strong characteristics, you're going to emulate that, and then when you become a mentor, you're going to pass that on to the next set of people that you start training. You've got to have similar goals, so that they can steer you through problems that you're going to have. Now, for example, I have a couple of former graduate students who have academic positions, and they often call me, or I'll see them at meetings, and we'll discuss situations in their laboratory where there's been conflict of interest, or they've had a problem with their chair, or all these things that pop up in a career. And because I've had all those problems myself, we can sit down and chit-chat about it, and I don't always have the answers, but it's great to be able to know that you've gone through similar situations. And remember, your mentors have all been graduate students. They've all been postdocs. They have, their own stories, so that they can relate to your situation as long as you're communicating with them. A mentor should have an open mind and allow the mentee to progress at a more natural pace. Again, I didn't know what that exactly meant, but so I reinterpreted it to develop independence. A good mentor will introduce you to a project, and then as you develop your expertise, that's going to be in an area that's not what they're familiar with. And everybody in my lab knows there's plenty of stuff I don't know anything about. They have the confidence to let you go off and work that out on your own. And by learning independence, you're going to be in a much better position as a person to have confidence in yourself, that you can do other things. They need to have a caring attitude. The mentor should care as much about the mentee's success as the mentee themselves. Now, I have to be honest with you. I do care about the people in my laboratory, the current people in my laboratory, but I haven't cared about everybody that has come through my laboratory. And one reason that I'm very much in favor of rotations is that you get to work with somebody and figure out, no, I can't do this, or yeah, this is a good match. And unfortunately, for postdocs, you don't really get that. You don't get to try out somebody. You have to really figure out if somebody's a good match based on your interactions and interacting with the PhD advisor and stuff like that, and knowing the field. From a PI's point of view. Again, so when I was looking for a postdoc, I had an offer from this famous guy, but he was the chairman of neurobiology at the University of Utah, and I was a graduate student in neuroscience down in Florida. So I kept asking him, because I knew he had a rotten reputation, to bring me out so I could see if I was going to like it. But he didn't want to spend the money. So I decided to go there, and I arrived, and he picked me up at my little apartment. So it was the first time we met. He picked me up to take me out to lunch so we could meet, blah, blah, blah. So I'd already moved, 2,000 miles away, and he, leaned over, and he shook my hand, and he said, I'm glad to meet you, but I just want to tell you that a lot of people don't like me, and if you don't like me, that's fine, you can leave. That was first sentence, that, to get to know this guy. And I'm like, okay. So I knew what I was in for. I knew I wasn't going to have somebody who really cared about me very much, but that was okay. I had a good environment in that department. So you have to have a positive attitude towards everything. Belief. A mentor who believes in a mentee is more effective. If I think you're going to fail, I'm not going to be able to give you the best career that you need. Just to give you an example. So I had a graduate student who was great, but ended up about a year before he finished up having a lot of family issues that were just totally distracting him from finishing his degree, concentrating on his work, all that kind of stuff. And so another colleague of mine had an advertisement for a postdoc position, and he came and he said to me, I want to apply for this. Would you give me a letter of recommendation? And I had to be honest with him, and that comes to this one, and I said, look, you're not in a place right now where you can handle a postdoc. I don't even know if you're going to finish your degree, which he did. I don't know if you're going to finish your degree. You should finish your degree. You should focus on the family. And then if you still want to do a postdoc, then do it. But don't apply for this one. I know this person, and if you're not working 150%, you're going to be out, and that's going to devastate you. So I didn't believe he could finish it. I think that I was honest, and he's now successfully working in industry. But it took a couple of years to get, all the family issues worked out. So these are from the mentor's perspective. What is a mentee? And there's actually a debate on the internet whether mentee is actually a word, or should it be mentoree. So you know who it is. Now, I put in this packet something that I found on the internet that I thought was really spectacular. It's from the Canadian Society of Explorative Geophysicists. But I wanted you to have this because, as I said, it's a two-way street. You have responsibilities, but you have expectations. The PI has expectations and responsibilities. And I thought this laid it out pretty nicely, that it might be useful for you all to have this. It's a partnership. You've got to think about the mentor. That person is wearing many hats, doing lots of different stuff. You're not the only one there, but you've got lots of roles. You're a student. Even if you're a postdoc, you're a student because you're learning the career skills. If you're a student, you're learning in the classroom, but then you're also learning in the laboratory. You need to absorb the mentor's knowledge. That's why I went to Utah. I wanted that knowledge, and it actually is what I learned in that lab has been the foundation of my entire scientific career. So it was worth it. It was worth it to have to put up with his bullshit for 2 years to get that foundation. But the mentee also has to have the ambition and the desire to use that knowledge and to put it to use. And you need to practice it and demonstrate what's been learned. Okay, so you have a responsibility. People aren't just, your mentor isn't just zooming, information into your brain and you're just kind of passively accepting it. That's what the internet's for. But you've got to fulfill your part. If they're gonna revise a manuscript for you or help you or revise your thesis proposal, you got to put the same amount of work in to learn why they're revising it this way or that way, something like that. And it's also your job to gauge how to measure the relationship, and that's hard. That's really hard. You have to be an interactive person. You have to kind of, you gotta figure out, and it takes time. It's not an overnight thing. It takes time to figure out how somebody else thinks and what their expectations are. And it's your job to take the initiative to ask for advice. If nobody comes into my office and asks my advice, I assume everything's fine. And often it's not. And either, people are upset about something or something isn't working. There's no point in waiting and hoping that your mentor is going to read your mind, because, I can only say in my case, I'm multitasking so much, I can't even keep track of what I'm doing. And so if you don't come in and say something, you're off my radar screen. Also, I know that got cut off, but you've got the hard copy. If you want something that's more challenging, you don't like your project, or your project is wrapping up, and you need to express these things. You need to make the relationship not, mom, dad, and 10-year-old. It's your job to make it a business relationship. That yes, you're being trained, but you're an active member of the collaboration. It's a collaboration. So I'm not going to go over the rest of all what's in that one paper from the exploration geophysicists, but I think it's worth it. I think it's pretty cool. I don't think I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is also from that business organization, what the mentee should be doing. They should be motivated to succeed. Now, if you find at some point in your career development that you're just not motivated for this aspect, you should realize that and look into other things. So I'm going to give you another, I just want to say, this helps ensure that the mentor doesn't think they're wasting their time with you. Right? I mean, why should I take time out of my really busy schedule for somebody who doesn't even want to be here? Right? Just to give you another example, I had a postdoc who was a very talented guy, and but he was always kind of avoiding the bench work. He liked it, but he spent all his time on the damn computer, just constantly. And okay, he was doing a lot of sequence work and stuff like that. But when he started, when his postdoctoral fellowship ran out, or was, it was time for him to be moving on, I sat down with him and I said, you spend a lot of time on the computer. It seems to me that what you ought to do is a second postdoc, but in bioinformatics. I don't know, think about it. And he was like, yeah, you're right. And he ended up getting a postdoc at the NIH. They have a big program in bioinformatics, and Gene Bank is there, right? So he worked for people that had been setting this up. So this is a couple decades ago. And then he got a job at Tiger, the Institute for Genomic Research. And now he's on the, it's not a faculty position, it's a senior scientist position at New York University doing all their bioinformatics stuff. So, you've got to be motivated for what you're doing. Otherwise it's just showing up 9 to 5, and that's not what it's all about to be a graduate student or to be a postdoc. You've got to be in love with what you're doing. You've got to have time management skills. And if you don't have them, you need to figure out how to develop them. And there's a gazillion books on how to do that. And I've read some of these, because when I was raising kids, I was lost for a while. You've got to have sufficient skills to commit enough time to get the job done. And the job is never done. Working in the lab, if you're a technician, working in the lab is 9 to 5. If you're a graduate student or a postdoc, it's not. The experiments dictate your time. And you've got to show that you're able to do that. that you can get the work done. I mean, you may be really fast and efficient, but there are going to be times when you've got to juggle lots of different things, especially if you're also teaching. Positive attitude, respect for your mentor. Now, it's true that I made lots of fun of my postdoctoral mentor when I was at a bar with other people, but everybody in the department did too. But I did respect his knowledge. I did respect it. Willingness to learn, honesty in your work. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Your scientific work, you have to be very honest in your interpretation of the data and in doing the data and recording the data. That's a fundamental given in the scientific field, right? You need to be honest in your personal interaction with your mentor, but also with other members of the lab. You need to be a good citizen, and you need to not create conflicts. Clear communication, and that's not just in writing. Communicating with your mentor or with other members, and with other members of your lab. I want to bring this up. Do you understand what's being taught? If you don't understand something, you have to ask. And sometimes that's intimidating, especially as a junior person, to say, I don't understand what you're talking about, or I don't know how to do this. And a lot of articles that I've been reading, you know, they're talking about diversity of the workforce. There's the general impression that certain cultures are very different than the Western culture in asking questions. And that causes problems in labs because if you don't, so it's considered a respect that you don't ask questions of the more senior people. So it's a cultural difference. It's also something that junior people tend to do, that they think, oh, well, I don't understand, but I guess because I don't know anything about this, I'm going to go off on the side and try to figure it out. It's much more efficient to ask directly. I didn't get that. I don't understand what's going on. I have to say, I'm collaborating with somebody who, so we're trying to put some data together, and on Tuesday, he had put the data together in this format, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't get it. And then I had to write it out this way, and then we went back, and he didn't know what the hell I was talking about. So, I mean, this happens a lot, right, in any kind of an interaction. It's not just related to science, but you got to be honest enough to say, okay, I don't understand. Let's work this out. And finally, we figured out, you know, where the gaps were and what we had to do to finish the experiment. But it took a while because we had two very different ways of looking at the same set of numbers. And you've got to have confidence in yourself that you're going to be able to get through this process. And sometimes that's pretty hard for a mentee, because you are in a new situation, you're learning new stuff, and you're thrown into a group of people that you didn't know before. You know, when you first join a lab, either as a graduate student or as a postdoc, and you don't know anybody, and you feel like, you know, the odd person out. But you do have to have, and sometimes you have to do this to yourself. You have to have confidence that you're going to get through it. My postdoc advisor fired me 3 times for things I hadn't done, but I don't know. I just, you know, it was always on a Friday, and I went home over the weekend and just did something and went back to work on Monday, and it had all blown over. And so, you know, you have to kind of have, you know. So, okay. Any comments? I mean, there's no questions. I don't have answers. I'm just coming up with a list. Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time with the last thing that's in here. So, for my career, so I established my lab at the University of Virginia as an assistant professor in 1983. That was a long time ago. I moved to GW in '92. And I have never done what I'm going to suggest to you until recently. So I have never had a lab document. And that's the last thing in there, so I'm sharing my document until this past spring. I've never done this. I've managed my lab by the seat of my pants, using common sense, never reading any of these things, but, you know, having it in the back of my mind that this is how one should, you know, treat people, how one should mentor people. But I ran into a major problem a little over 2 years ago, in that my lab virtually disintegrated before my very eyes because of conflict of interest. And I've had in my career, I can think of 2 other occasions where I had personnel conflicts of interest that really disrupted the lab and disrupted productivity. And, you know, we're not trained in how to deal with this. We don't get training in management. I would suggest you pick up a couple books. And I was able to deal with things and get through the situations until 2 years ago. And it was such a problem, and it weighed on everybody in the lab. It affected everybody. And it was such a problem that I went to HR, to human resources, finally. So let me step back. First, I used the techniques that I had, you know, learned over the years and said, okay, this should take care of it. No. And then I went to the departmental admin who deals with the personnel, the staff within the department and in our office. So she manages the personnel in the office and deals with the staff in the labs. And had long discussions with her about how to approach it. And she also had discussions with people from my lab who had gone to her to say, I'm having this problem, what do I do? Didn't deal with it, didn't take care of the situation. So then I finally went to HR, and I sat with them for a long time to learn, to get their advice as to what to do. And one of the things that they said to me was that you have these expectations in your mind, but have you ever written them down? And that's a very typical HR thing. Whenever there's some kind of interpersonal problem, you got to document it. And so I was at a meeting shortly after that, and I was talking to a former graduate student of mine who's now a very famous craniofacial biologist, and I was telling her about this problem, and she said, oh, you know, this guy in the field that we both know, he told me he has this document, and that he gives it to everybody when they join the lab. And I forgot to give it to Stephanie until last week. Anyhow, so I want to take a look at it. So this document comes from the paper that's also in there that says 10 simple rules. These rules are for the mentor to follow, to write a lab document. So I thought if you wanted, you could give it to your PI. So and one of the rules here is that you can plagiarize. You're allowed to plagiarize. So I asked this colleague, who's a famous researcher at the Stowers Institute for Medical Research, if I could plagiarize his lab document, and he was like, well, fine. So it's a plagiarism of a plagiarism. But I customized it to our lab. And I handed it out this spring, and we discussed it at a lab meeting. And once a year, we're going to go over it and talk about it and see how things are going, because, you know, people come and go. So every lab should define what its goals are in the broad sense. And these are the goals. We want to do quality science. That's all that keeps the lab in business. You do quality science, you get the publications, you get grants, and you get people to come for you in order to do the science, to publish the papers, to get the grants. Okay. It's got to be quality science, not slipshod crap. Another goal is to develop each lab member to be a successful scientist. And it doesn't matter if it's the technician or the PI or the graduate student, postdocs or the senior scientist or whoever it is. There's a commitment on a personnel level to develop each individual. It's not a guarantee that that will be successful, but that's a goal. And I added, because of this significant personnel problem that my lab was having, that another important goal is the interpersonal relationships. That it is imperative that you're collegial and that it's an intellectually stimulating environment. And so I defined those three aspects. That's what the lab is all about. It's not just doing quality science, but of course that's the foundation. That's the first part of it. But we're not a family, but we're a set of colleagues that are working with each other to accomplish these goals. Okay. Now, you can look through this. I didn't want to put it on a PowerPoint because it goes on and on and on. It's 4 pages long. There are several statements of what you can expect from me as the PI. I set the scientific direction of the lab, and I provide the means to pursue those directions. That's in other words, I have to get the grants. I got to get the money. The second one, I'm committed to mentoring you now and in the future. That might not last forever, in that I can just tell you that I did have one graduate student who, after her postdoc, I didn't write letters for her anymore. The reason being that I could only write about what she had done 10 years ago, and I said, look, this is out of date, right? But I have other graduate students who have remained in the same field as me and that I see at meetings, and I continue to promote them and write letters for them, et cetera. I'll encourage you to attend scientific meetings, and I'll make an effort to fund these activities. I guarantee each person in my lab, except for the technician, 1 meeting a year, and I'll find the money to do that. And if you find the money, that's even better. Maybe you can go to 2 then. Because going to a scientific meeting is a very important part of your career development. You need to learn how to network. You need to put yourself out there. And you need to meet people. And if you go to the same meetings as me, which is likely because I go to way too many, I'll introduce you to a lot. I know a lot of people. Your PI knows a lot of people. These are likely to be people who might be looking for a postdoc next year or who might have a job opening in their department. And I'll tell you, the PIs talk about this all the time. They're all sitting at the dinner table by themselves, and they're not talking about their kids, right? They're talking about, oh, I've got somebody you really want to think about getting into your department. And I will provide a work environment that's intellectually stimulating, supportive, safe, and free from harassment. To me, that was a really important statement because it also gives me the ability to fire somebody who's not abiding by those characteristics. So this was, HR stepping in. but I also think it's really important. And we're all familiar with cases of harassment in labs. I think we've all at least heard about it through our friends. We all know, you know, when graduate advisors talk about where should we advise people to go, there's certain labs that are called toxic, and you know you're told to avoid it. So I want to let everybody know that I'm not going to stand for that. Okay, but I have expectations of you. You take ownership of your career training and goals. I'm not going to miraculously get you a job. I don't have a magic wand. I can advise you. I can ask around my friends. I do this all the time at meetings. But you have to decide what it is you want. And this goes for whether it's, you know, academia or not, industry, policy, whatever. If you're interested in those things, you've got to do the footwork. And going back to one of those principles of the mentor should have experience, I'm familiar with somebody right now who wants to go into pharma. I can't advise you. I don't know anything about pharma. You've got to go find, if that's the way you want to go, you've got to find somebody that can help you do that, okay? So your mentor, you have to take the responsibility to finding what it is that you need. You'll keep me updated on your research progress and challenges. You schedule the meetings. And, you know, there are advisors who never want to see you. That's like you go talk to a postdoc, and there are advisors who want to meet with you on a regular basis. I meet with people in my lab when they remember to schedule it every 2 weeks individually, one-on-one. And we have lab meetings every 2 weeks, so there's always a chance to talk. Some PIs are so busy that they're just absolutely not available. I try to keep my door open. We moved from the second floor of Ross up to the 5th floor just about a year ago, in October, I think. My office, I used to have 2 labs, one here and one here, and my office was in the middle, and their office was in the middle, I mean the staff and everybody. And so when you walked from here to here, you would see each other, right? And so it was really easy just to pop in. Oh, by the way, blah, blah, blah. Well, now my lab's here and my office is here, and I never see anybody. They never come and visit me. And, you know, I'm usually working on 10 million different things in my office, and I'm sitting at my computer, and every once in a while there's this little knock. And I say at the lab meetings, please, come bother me. If my door is open, come bother me. But when they knock on the door and I'm in the middle of a sentence, I go, wait a minute. And so they think, oh, well, she doesn't really want to see me. But I do. I was told the other day, somebody said, you never do this to somebody. You never do that. Because it makes them feel like they've interrupted you so much that they never want to come back. So I have to practice that. You will develop your personal research skills. You read the literature, you plan your experiments, so this is the nitty-gritty. So first we get over kind of the general stuff. You keep detailed lab notebooks. You develop your writing and presentation skills. You go to the seminars. You develop your own mentoring and management skills. You apply for fellowships and grants, and you learn how to accept and utilize constructive criticism. So there's a lot of things that a mentee has to, you got to realize it's up to you. And if you're going to be an independent whatever, I mean, whether it's in academia or not, you know, not just a cog in the wheel, but I think most of us are in this field because we want to be independent. You gotta develop those skills, and that starts as a mentor. And then there's other stuff that are very specific, you know, in terms of how you should act in the lab. So we don't need to go over that. I brought it up because this I feel that this now gives the group guidance of what's in my head. Before I did this and put it in writing, and we sat down as a group and discussed it, I made assumptions that the people in the lab could read my mind. And I certainly couldn't read theirs. You know, I should have known better. So I'm giving this to you to kind of give you an idea of the thought processes that I went through to put it together, and that you may recognize some things in there that maybe could help you be a better scientist, a better mentor, some topics that you might want to discuss with your mentor, and see if they'd be interested in writing something up like this. Most of us are pretty cynical, and we're like, I don't need that. I'm fine. Everything's going well. But I thought, you know, as more junior people, you might see some value into some of these thoughts. So that's really all I had to say, except I like this last sentence, this last section. It has to do with career planning, and this is completely plagiarized from Paul Trainer, but it rang a bell with me. Your mentor is speaking to you. I can't pick your destination, choose your voyage, or ask you to repeat what I went through. God knows you wouldn't want to. I can't determine your goals or ignite your ambition. Can't be you. I can encourage you, support you, maybe inspire you, but you need to have all those qualities: motivation, drive, and ambition. You're in charge of your career. The mentor is there to help you, but you need to make sure that you need to figure out what it is you want to do. That takes a lot of time. I started off as a music major. So, and then I got, a bachelor's in bio. I switched because I realized I was a crappy musician. I wasn't going to be able to make a living at it. I switched to biology, which was my second love, but I got it from a liberal arts college. So I worked as a technician, and that's where I found that I really, really loved working in the lab, and that's where I figured out that I wanted to do neuroscience, so I went to a neuroscience PhD program. And I was a neuroscientist for a really long time until I became a developmental biologist, and now I call myself a developmental geneticist. You evolve through the process. That's fine, but I'm not saying that, you're in charge of your career, that you got to know exactly every step, until you retire. You would expect to evolve into finding lots of different things that are of interest to you. But it's up to you. It's up to you. And so you need to take that responsibility. And once you do that, I think it's easier to have an honest relationship with your mentor and optimize how they can help you the best to get to where it is that you need. So that's my opinion. Anything? No. Good lunch.
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you especially to Dr. Moody for sharing your efforts and your expertise today.